So HATMANA is a whole new parsha in the Dorabbanans of what is permitted or usher on Erev Shabbos. On Shabbos, we're opening up a whole new world. Many of the kulas that we discussed when we discussed Hilchos Chazara, Hilchos She'iyah, do not apply to HATMANA. So we have to be mevarer what's the site of the Isser, and then we have to see what's the actual Pratei Halacha, the nafkaminas, and of course, obviously, to try to see different situations, different kulas, different chumras, in order to make this sugya more lebedik. The tachlis of HATMANA, kipshuta, is to keep in the chaim. That's the whole purpose, is that the person, we're afraid. The purpose of why one does HATMANA is because he wants to make sure that his food should remain hot. Chazal, we're concerned with two scenarios. There's HATMANA b'davar hamoisif hevel, and there's HATMANA b'davar she'eina moisif hevel. What's a davar she'eina moisif hevel? You can have something that you wrap in a blanket, that its sole purpose is it does not increase the chaim, it just shomer the chaim. It retains the heat that's still there. For example, I take a cholent, and it's Friday night. It could be even. Let's make it an easy case. It's Shabbos morning, and you see that the electricity went out, and you come down. It's like 8 o'clock in the morning, and you see that the electricity has gone out, but you see that the cholent is still hot. Your first reaction is, we learned last time this culmination shayla is about putting it back on a hot plate. Is this called oidabi yodai? Is it called daita lahachzir? Do we say, it was on the fire as when Shabbos came in, so we have the ran? And the person thinks to himself, this is all very nice, but I don't have a hot plate to put it onto. So maybe I would be able to be makel to put it onto a different hot plate, but I don't have the different hot plate to put it on. And to put it on my neighbor's hot plate, so let's say you don't have an Erev, so I can't put it on a neighbor's hot plate. So what do I do with my cholent? The first reaction of most people will be, look, I have a simple idea. Take this cholent. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. The fire went off maybe an hour ago. It's still boiling hot. Now take it. You wrap it in a blanket. You wrap it around and around in a blanket. And now, by the time that the meal hits, you'll daven quite quickly. L'shem shemayim, of course. You'll daven quite quickly. You'll be home by 10 o'clock. And you'll have the cholent by 10:15. It'll still be warm because the heat will be retained. The blanket will enable you to retain the heat. That's called in halacha HATMANA b'davar she'eina moisef hevel. And Chazal answered HATMANA b'davar she'eina moisef hevel. They answered that on Shabbos. If one would want to do that on Erev Shabbos, it would be permitted. What's the vart? Why did Chazal answer doing HATMANA b'davar she'eina moisef hevel? So if you look, the notion of Rashi already, and excuse me, is in Daf Lamed Daled. Rashi Dibra Matzil Hachigar Sinan. It's also a Ravid and the Ritva. Rashi says Gzeira Shema Yartiach. What does that mean? That means, look what happened. The person, he's nervous that his food, his cholent is not going to be hot, and you see he's very sehitzt about his food, so he's going to come to take that cholent and to cook it up. So on Shabbos, the fear is that he's going to come to cook it up. Therefore, on Shabbos, we don't let you wrap, even in a davar, she'eina moisef hevel, even in something that does not increase the heat. And that's the halacha l'maisa. That cholent on Shabbos, it would be forbidden to take that cholent, even though you're going to have cold cholent, but it would be forbidden to take that cholent, wrap it in blankets on Shabbos, even though all you're doing is retaining the heat. And even though we saw last time it could be that cholent, we'd be makel to put on a different hot plate. It's an unbelievable thing. Try explaining this to a guy. We're allowed to get a guy to take that cholent, which was on the fire as when Shabbos came in, and go and bring it to a different hot plate. But to go and wrap it in a blanket, that we're not allowed to do. It's ad k'dei kach that I once had this shayla. I didn't have a shayla. Somebody came to me in shul, and that's why I'm mentioning this case. He came to me in the shul on Shabbos morning, and he said to me that he had a whole shayla. His hot plate went out. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. The whole story that you're hearing right now. His hot plate went out. It was 8 o'clock in the morning, and he saw he's not going to have a hot cholent. He said, I'm not getting involved. I know this big machlekes if you're allowed to put it on a hot plate, not on a hot plate, and somebody else's hot plate. He said, I took it, I wrapped it in a blanket, and I have no shilas. I told him, you have a bigger shaila. You were over on HATMANA. which is bevadai aser. Mashenkin, if you were to put it on a different hot plate, so since it was still warm, and you have the ran, that if it was on a fire as it when Shabbos came in, so you certainly would be makel to put on somebody else's hot plate. But to go ironically and to wrap it in a blanket, that's aser lekule alma. And that's aser only on Shabbos. Why? Because if the Sibas HaIsser is that you're going to come, Shema Yar Siach, you're going to see that it's cold, you're going to come to heat it up, you're going to come to go make fires on Shabbos and whatnot. So Chazal, we're concerned with that only on Shabbos. But on Erev Shabbos, what am I worried about? I'm worried that he's going to see that his food is cold, and what's he going to do if his food is cold? Exactly. He's going to go and heat it up, which on Erev Shabbos you're allowed to do. So therefore, let's say a person comes on Erev Shabbos, and he says, you know what? This Erev Shabbos, this Shabbos, it's very, very hot. My understanding is in New York, it is, and I quote from my youth, John Mantone, it's hazy, hot, and humid. So here you are, over there, it's hazy, it's hot, it's humid. I don't want to have a hot plate. It'll be hazy, hot, humid, and hot plate. Right? So I don't know what to do. So I got a great idea. I'll take that. You can't not have chicken soup on Friday night. That's already a shiloh of the religion. So what I'll do is I'll take my chicken soup or whatever other hot things I want. I'll heat them up very hot Erev Shabbos, and I'll wrap them in blankets on Erev Shabbos. That's mutter because HATMANA. Bedavar she'ena moisef hevel is mutter on Erev Shabbos, and it's only also on Shabbos. That's Rabbi Yisai HATMANA bedavar she'ena moisef hevel. And then Chazal made what seemingly is a totally separate gzeira. The truth is, if you look in the Rabbeinu Hanan, the Rambam, it could be it's a very related gzeira, but the Shitas Rashi, it's a totally separate gzeira. Chazal were a geyser on HATMANA bedavar hamoisef hevel. What's HATMANA bedavar moisef hevel? A whole different story. Chazal were afraid, and this halacha is even on Erev Shabbos. You're not allowed to be matmin, which means to completely wrap. We'll see completely, not completely, but certainly in the meantime, completely. You're not allowed to take what in those times was remits, basically the coals, or even the upper of the coals, the dust of the coals, which are boiling hot. And you're not allowed to take that remits, that coals, that dust of coals, and wrap your cholent in it, even on Erev Shabbos. Now, what's this? Erev Shabbos, why can't I do that? And over here, it seems to be, say the Paiskim, it doesn't help mitztamik v'raloi. When it came to Shia, when it was mitztamik v'raloi, everything was mutter. And it doesn't help if it's fully cooked. All the things we had by Shia, nothing else. And it doesn't help groof of a ketuma. Nobody here says there's a kula. Maybe there's some Rishayim, but the way we paskin, there's no heter of goof of a ketuma, there's no heter of mitztamik v'raloi, there's no heter of fully cooked. So I have a fully cooked potato kugel, which is mitztamik v'raloi, boiling hot potato kugel. It's already cooked, and I put it in some type of remits. I put it in some type of remits. Even though it's remits, you put on it the dust, Rabbi side to make it that you can't even stoke it. So Chazal say, you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. If you wrap it, you wrap your cholent, you say, hey, Erev Shabbos, I'm just going to wrap it in this remit. That's aser. Why? There's an Issa called HATMANA bedavar hamoisef hevel, something that increases heat. These are fire. This is a form of the fire, and it is something that's increasing heat to the cholent. Now, why is this aser? So here, Chazal were afraid that if a person is going to go and be matmin bedavar hamoisef hevel, so then we're afraid, you know what he's going to come to do? He's going to get nervous, he's going to get sits, and he's going to start stoking those coals. And even if you put on them ashes to make it that they're not so hot, but when you stoke it, it's going to flare it up. Now, why are we afraid of that? Before, when it came to Shia, we weren't afraid. When we had that same potato kugel on an open fire in your oven, we weren't afraid. It's mitztamik v'raloi, it's fully cooked. It was, let's say, even if there was a blech, all those things, when it came to the potato kugel by Shahia, we weren't bothered. Why all of a sudden am I bothered, even on Erev Shabbos, that I'm not allowed to be matmin in a dover, hamoisef hevel? Oh, because Chazal see, look, this guy is obviously extremely nervous about his food, because most people, they suffice with just putting their cholent on a fire, whatever. Okay, a potato kugel on a fire. This guy is so nervous that he's wrapping it. He shows us he's sehitzt. There's no word that can bring it out. Rabbi said better than say it. He's nervous. He's worried. He's constantly in tune with his food. What's going to be? So we want to show you got to get out of the kitchen. But over here, nothing's going to help on this guy. So we can't say, well, put a blech and all these hekedim and dust. By you see you're wrapping it. We see how nervous you are. Oh, so we don't want that nervous matziv even from Erev Shabbos, because then it's going to come Shabbos, he's going to come to stoke. So therefore, Chazal answered, even on Erev Shabbos, HATMANA b'davar amoisif hevel. And not only did they ask HATMANA b'davar amoisif hevel of the Remetz case where you could stoke it, they answered any davar that's moisif hevel, even if you can't stoke it. The Gemara has all types of strange scenarios that we don't have today, like some type of a salt, some type of sulfur, different types of materials that you can't stoke and make them hotter. But they inherently are things that increase heat. You're not allowed to wrap in those things on Erev Shabbos. Why? Gzeira, I'll come to wrap it in Remetz on Erev Shabbos, and if I come to wrap it in Remetz on Erev Shabbos, I'll come to stoke it. It's Gzeiras, Ligzeiras, etc. And that's Rabbi Yisai are the two Gzeiras of Chazal, very different. One is HATMANA b'davar she'eina moisef hevel, wrapping it in a towel, that's usher only on Shabbos. To take a cholent, or for the fire, wrap it in, the hot plate goes off or whatever, and you want to wrap it on Erev Shabbos, it would be mutter. On Shabbos, it would be aser. And then there's HATMANA b'davar moisef hevel. And HATMANA b'davar moisef hevel is aser even on Erev Shabbos. You're not allowed to wrap it in something that increases the heat. If it's an increaser of the heat, it's also even Erev Shabbos, because we see you're very nervous. And they answered anything that increases heat. We'll see. We only, computer, we don't have any of these things. We don't have Remetz. We're not wrapping in Remetz. Certainly, I don't think anybody ever wrapped in Remetz. And we're certainly not wrapping in sulfur. So computer, it seems to be the only thing we'd have to worry about is HATMANA b'davar eina moisef hevel, and not a davar that is eina moisef hevel. However, and this is very important, however, comes along the Shulchan Aruch over here, and that Rabbi Yisai is basically, now you learned, Sif Aleph, ein toimnim b'Shabbat avidu b'davar she'eina moisef hevel. Now you appreciate that by Safek Chashecha, if it's Ben Hashmashes, you are allowed to wrap in a davar ha. Eina moisef hevel. Why are you allowed to wrap in something that's eina moisef hevel, even ben hashmashes? Because say Chazal, most pots are fully cooked and boiling by the time that ben hashmashes hits. When do you usually have this issue that it might be cold, and when it's cold, he might come to cook it and then wrap it? He's going to go and open it up. He's about to take his cholent off. Let's say our case, the hot plate went out. So he knows the hot plate went out. So what's his normal reaction going to be? He's going to quickly take off the cholent and see what's going on. He's going to open up. He might see it's cold. We see that you might see it's cold. You're going to go to cook it up. So the Chazal said, not gedai to go and look if it's cold, because we're not going to let you wrap it. So the Mela, he stays out. On Erev Shabbos, we said, what's the problem? Let him go check if it's cold. He'll just cook it up. It's Erev Shabbos, and then he'll wrap it. So therefore, it's mutter. But let's say it's a time frame when usually the pots are hot. So the Chazal weren't geyser. When are usually the pots hot? Right when Shabbos comes in. So Chazal weren't geyser. Unless, like the Shulchan Aruch says in Reis Tamachal, that he was Makabel Shabbos. But if he wasn't Makabel Shabbos, so then you're allowed to wrap in a davar ha'eina moisef hevel. Like I had this shaila a few months ago. Somebody came and it was mamash shkia. It was like in those days. So a few months ago. So it was in the wintertime. So shkia was around 5 o'clock, and he came. It was mamash like 5:03. And the guy came to me and he said the hot plate went out, and he had mamish this shaila. He said the cholent in a crack pot, and all that was necessary by him was he had some chicken and the chicken soup. So he said, am I allowed to do anything? I said, you can go and bring it to a neighbor with a hot plate and this, that. He goes, Ben Hashmashes. I told him he could make a, he asked me, could I just wrap it in a blanket? I told him, sure, you wrap it in a blanket, it's Ben Hashmashes. I said, wait, were you Makabel Shabbos? So he said, he wasn't Makabel Shabbos because he's been running around doing all these things. So Mele, he's allowed to go and wrap it because Stam Kederis are boiling when it comes to Ben Hashmashes, and therefore they were not geyser on HATMANA b'davar ha'eina moisef hevel on Ben Hashmashes. So that's Rabbi Yisai number one. And then the Shulchan Aruch says the next line, Ve'ein toimim b'davar moisef hevel, you're not allowed to be timing in something that increases the heat. And ad kedei kach, they might even ask the b'diavad, those things we'll have to talk about. Okay, that Rabbi Yisai is Sif Aleph. Now most of us are thinking the whole gzeira of davar ha'eina moisef hevel, that's negayos. But that, and then most of us are thinking it's negayah me. I never wrapped my cholent in a blanket. I never wrapped my chicken soup in a blanket. It's a nice idea that the rabbi's saying because, sounds interesting, but I never did it till now. So maybe if the hot plate goes off, maybe I would do it. And now I wouldn't do it, but I wouldn't have thought to do it anyway. So it's nishkefela. And maybe a person will think, look, I don't want to keep on a hot plate the whole entire Shabbos. So maybe taka, I'll just heat it up before Shabbos, wrap the chicken soup in a blanket. It's a very nice idea. I'll buy a blanket, we'll write on it Shabbos Kodesh, and they even sell them a Shabbos Kodesh blanket, half of a fella. Now I can do it on Erev Shabbos and I can't do it on Shabbos. But if he thinks to himself, most people, that I don't have a situation of HATMANA, B'davar, Moisef Hevel, where do we have a case? None of us have remets, none of us have gefes, none of us have any of these things. Half the things the Shulchan Aruch is going to talk about, we don't even know what these things are. Then comes along the Shulchan Aruch and Sif Ches with a case that all of us potentially can have of HATMANA b'davar Moisef Hevel. Comes again the Shulchan Aruch and he says, comes again the Shulchan Aruch and Sif Ches. Shulchan Aruch says, I'm going to give you a case of HATMANA b'davar Moisef Hevel that every one of us has. That's, you have a situation of a fire or some form of a remetz underneath the pot. Now, what happens if I take a davar she'eina moisef hevel, like let's say a towel? I take a towel, and the towel on Erev Shabbos is mutter. So I take a towel and I wrap my cholent in a towel. And now I take this cholent, which is wrapped in a towel, and I put it on a davar hamoisef hevel, like gefes, or like remetz. I'm allowed to take my pot and leave it on a fire in Erev Shabbos, which we learned by Arichas. However, if it's wrapped in clothing, it's wrapped in a davar she'eina moisef hevel. That the begadim on their own don't increase the heat, but mikol makkah, you know what happens? The heat rises and goes into the towel, and the towel becomes a davar moisef hevel. Kivyachol, as if the heat rises. I have a towel over here, and the towel's pushing in the heat between the towel and the pot. So my towel is now enabling the gefes or the remetz to go and moisif its hevel all around the pot. Oh, Zok the Shulchan Aruch HaMoifes. I found the case of a davar moisif hevel even in Tavshin Pei Beis. None of us have remetz. None of us have any of these things. Gefes, sulfat, all these, we don't even know what they are. But we do have a hot plate and we do have a fire. And a lot of people, what they'll do is like this. They'll take a hot plate, they'll put the cholent on it, and then they'll wrap the cholent in a beautiful blanket that they bought in the Svarim store that says L'Kavod Shabbos Kodesh. And L'fi this Shulchan Aruch, it's not L'Kavod Shabbos Kodesh, it's Hilchos Shabbos Kodesh. Because over here, the heat is trapped by the towel or the blanket. And if it's surrounded, it has to be surrounded on all sides. We'll see, because otherwise it's HATMANA b'miktzas, which the Shulchan Aruch himself is actually machmir on, and the Ramah is actually meklon. But let's say a lot of times what people do on Erev Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, when I have to be by somebody's house, I go right to the kitchen. I walk into the kitchen, and sometimes I see a towel draped on the cholent over here, the chicken soup over here. No, I'm not so worried because the sides of the soup are open and the sides of the cholent are open. So I just told you, it's Erev Shabbos. He did an Erev Shabbos. But if it would be HATMANA b'davar moisef hevel, it's also even Erev Shabbos. But I look and it's not HATMANA b'davar moisef hevel. Why? The towel is clapping the heat. Yeah, the towel is clapping the heat, but the sides are open, and that's called HATMANA b'miktzas, which there are mapaskins over here. HATMANA b'miktzas is loishma HATMANA. But sometimes I have a cholent pot over here. I have a chicken soup over here. Here's my cholent. Here's my chicken soup. And then in the middle, like this, I have a potato kugel over there, balancing between the two. So now, sometimes he comes and he takes a ganze towel. Okay, this is getting harder. He takes a ganze towel and he drapes it over the chicken soup. Remember my chicken soup and my potato kugel? And he drapes it over. And now that towel is surrounding and totally enclosing the potato kugel. So now the potato kugel is mutman on all sides. You're going to say, what do you mean it's mutman on all sides? Beseder, but it's mutman a davar she'eina moisef hevel. It's not a davar she'eina moisef hevel. Yes, it is. It's a towel. But the towel chaps the heat from underneath, and it turns the entire towel into a davar moisef hevel, and that's what the Shulchan Aruch is saying. A case in Tafshin Pei Beis that we have HATMANA b'davar hamoisef hevel. So this Abaisai is you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do this. And when I see this, I come into the kitchen and I fix it and I make sure that it's open. No, and when I do it, most people don't ask questions, and now you'll do it. So they'll ask and you'll explain. Siman Reish and Zayin, Sif Ches is aser. That's l'chayra. I must tell you that there is a Mishnah Berurah here, and this Mishnah Berurah in Sif Katan Mem Gimel, it's a long Mishnah Berurah, and it's a very important Mishnah Berurah. And if you want to know who was very busy with this Mishnah Berurah, it's none other than our Rebbe, Rabbeinu HaGadol, the Dibris Moshe. That's Moshe Feinstein in his, not his Chuvas Svarim, but in his Svarim on Sugyas, Moshe and Siman Lamed Tes and HaOrah Gimel has a very big discussion about this Mishnah Berurah. What's the need in? So the truth is, everybody say, is that this comes really from a Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos and Daf Mem Zayin the Beis brings down that Reb Zera said, "Kupa shetamin ba is also laniach al gefesh al zeisim." It says over there in the Gemara that if you have a kupa, if you have a box, which a box is seemingly a davar she'eina moisef hevel, and a davar she'eina moisef hevel wouldn't be a problem. But if you take this, and even though it was a box that was filled with all types of, don't think it was a box that wasn't touching the pot, because if it wasn't touching the pot, HATMANA is only when the surrounding matman agent is touching the pot. But they had some type of a kupa, some type of a box, that inside they put all this fluff and wool and who knows what, which was a davar she'eina moisef hevel. It says that box, you're not allowed, also laniach al gefesh al zeisim, even on Erev Shabbos. You're not allowed to put it on Gefes. Gefes is one of the things that might have hevel. All the Rishonim say, why not? What's this all about? But the Rishonim have a much bigger problem. The Rishonim's problem is it seems that there was, and Taisus talks about this, and all the Rishonim talk about this, it would seem, Taisus in Daf Mem Chesam and Aleph, it would seem, the Yesh Tema says Taisus, Heyach anu matminim al kiras shalanim shekarin astara. And Afapisha Gorfin Oisai, it's Moisav Hevel, like the Gefes. There seem to be some medieval minig that they used to take their cholents, they would wrap them in towels, and they would shovel out the ovens, and they would put the towel with the cholent in the oven, and obviously the oven was off, so therefore it wasn't as super hot, and the towel would enable the cholent to retain its heat. So the Ri, which is brought in the Magen Avram, which is brought in our Mishnah Berurah and Sivkat Mem Gimel, bring down that l'chayra, this is against the Gemara. You're wrapping something in a moisif hevel, in a moisif hevel, and you're putting it on a moisif hevel. The way I explained the sugya is that the davar that's ein a moisif hevel chaps the heat, and Memela turns the entire towel into a davar, a moisif hevel, which should be aser on Shabbos. That's the Ri's kasha. That's all the Rishonim's kasha. There are two basic mahalchim. There's really more than two, but we'll discuss maybe two or three basic mahalchim over here. The Ri's mahalch to answer this kasha is not the way I explained it until now. Till now, the way I explained it is, which we'll see in a minute where that comes from, is that why you're not allowed to take a davar ein a moisif hevel and put it on a davar that's moisif hevel, because I explained that you're turning the ein a moisif hevel into a moisif hevel, because it chaps the heat and it kivyachol one big moisif hevel. If that's the case, then the minig is shver, says the Ri, because that's what's going on here. There's a kira, which even though you shoveled it out, but it's boiling hot, the towel chaps it and it mamish makes it hot. It makes it hot. Says the Ri, that's not the pshat in the Gemara. The pshat in the Gemara is there's no real isser of taking an ein a moisif hevel and putting it on a moisif hevel. What's the problem? I'm an ein a moisif hevel, so who cares that I'm on top? Well, putting it on top is not a problem. Wrapping it is not a problem. 0 plus 0 is not a problem. Oh, then what's the problem, Zaktari? The problem is over here, specifically, if a person shows us that he's already matman, by the fact that he already put it in a towel, and he's putting it in gefes, which is something that is a moisif hevel, we're afraid he's going to go and take it and put it inside the gefes. And Nugzera. Since already you're showing us that you're interested in HATMANA, and you have something here which is moisif hevel, so we never let you wrap something and then put it on a moisif hevel, because then we're afraid you're going to go and be matmined in the moisif hevel. Zok the Helikari, that's pshat in the minig. The minig was that they would wrap it in a towel and put it in a kira, in a shoveled kira. What are you going to do? You're going to go and take this cholim pat and wrap it in a kira? You can't wrap things in a kira. So to read, the only time they said it is if it's shayich to wrap it inside the dover that's moisef hevel. And if that's to read, our case, the minig Yisrael, that's what the read is talking about, of wrapping a towel, wrapping a cholim in a towel and putting it inside a shoveled out oven is going to be mutter. That's how the read learns. The Rosh, the Rabbeinu Baruch, one of the Bali Taisasim, is brought in Taisis and Daf Mem Ches. I'll say this part slow. I forgot to bring this as a marmakim for the Olam, but I'm sure in the next few days, the Olam probably is going to see it. The Rosh, he brings the Taisis, they all bring Rabbeinu Baruch, and he learns, no, Avada, the Pshat in the Gemara that says you can't take a kupa in a Davra Ein Moisef Hevel, and you can't put it on a Davra that's Moisef Hevel, like we explained originally, because you're turning that towel into a Davra Moisef Hevel. Then what was the pshat in this minig that they used to wrap in a towel inside a kira? So he says, oh, very good, Rabbi Kapel. He says, because the kira is no longer moisef v'heilich. It's not adding heat. It's true, it's still hot, and that's the chiddush. And you see, obviously, the Re was bothered by that. It's still boiling hot, and therefore we would have heard that it's now boiling hot, and it's making the towel getting this heat. So you're increasing the heat. But he says, no. Since, even though it's going to take time, but it's on its way down, there's a great moil in Yerushalayim, and I once asked him, his Gedarim, when I was learning Hilchos Mila, about when he makes a bris. And, Yerushalayim, they have their own rules and their own Kabbalas. I'm not getting involved in Halacha L'Maaseh for the Olam. But I asked him when, with the Billy Rubin and what the number, he said, Billy Rubin, I hear. He says, I want to know one thing. Is the Yingles is it going down? If it's going down, I'm making the bris. If I see that it's even a high number, I'm making the bris. If I see it's a low number, but it's not going down, I'm not making the bris. Over here also, I have over here an oven, it's going down. It's going to take a while, but it's going down. It's miskar v'hoilech. Oh, so that we don't see over here, this incredible HATMANA matziv of where he has a towel and it's chopping the HATMANA and it's making it to a moisef hevel. It's only when it's something which is on its way up, or at least not on its way down. What's the nafkamina? Everybody say nafkamina says the Goyin Rav Moshe and the Dibris Moshe Lamed Tasif Gimel is going to be our blechs. The nafkamina is going to be mamash our blech. Let's try and cheshbon out. Lefi, we take a cholent, we wrap it in a towel, and we put it on our hot plate. Is that going to be mutter or aser? Lefi Rabbeinu Baruch aser. And that's what I told you. That's why I go in on Erev Shabbos, and it says over here in the Mishnah Berurah, maybe ein limchais, but that's not a macha. I'm just helping out a Jew. But Rabbeinu Baruch would tell them they are not allowed to do that because that potato kugel was fully wrapped by the towel, and the fire is a fire that's moist. It's not like the kira in the medieval times, and the towel chops it, and the whole towel becomes a davar moist hevel. That's also even on Erev Shabbos. Mashe'ein kain. According to the Re says that what's the problem of the kupa on top of a hot plate? The problem of a kupa on top of a hot plate doesn't exist. Because the whole problem, the kupa on the gefes, was you'll come to be matmin in the gefes. So in the medieval times, you couldn't do it in the kira. I also can't be matmin. My cholent inside a hot plate. You can't be matmin a cholent in a hot plate. As I says, great Goyin Rav Moshe Feinstein Zeichat Tzadik Livracha, that's going to be the nafkamina of whether you learn like the Ri or whether you learn like Rabbeinu Baruch, the two reasons brought down in the Mishnah Berurah, are you allowed to take a towel and put it on top of your pots on the hot plate on Erev Shabbos? If you learn like the Ri, then it's going to be Takamutter, because I can't be matmin inside. Rabbeinu Baruch says that it's aser. Asay l'chatchila, one obviously should not do this. One shouldn't do this. That's Rabbi Isai part one, but now you have a case of a dover hamoisif hevel, which is negaya all of us. Now this Rabbi Isai, we're going to go. Is that crystal clear, Rabbi Isai? Does anybody have a shayla on that? I went a little slower because I know the Olim didn't see. The Taisus I at least didn't send to my market, but I hope it's clear. Now you have a case of a dover hamoisif hevel, which is negaya shavel kol nefesh, at least if you don't go with the Ri. The emes I'm sure the Olim would like to see it now inside the Mishnah Berurah and Tzivkat Mem Gimel. He says a gather of an ein limchais when it came to this type of shaila. It was an ein limchais.
Let's put up the Mishnah Berurah, please.
The Dibris Moshe is a little bit bothered by this Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, "Al pizeh teida the mashenoigen lahamid the coffee on a tonner and mechasim with begadim." Shmuel says it's not good what they're doing because the tanner is moisif, unless they would do it in a way where the towel draped down not on the side of the pot, but was a little bit to the right and left of the pot. He says mikol makom they shouldn't be meicha because he has what to be saimach. The Dibris Moshe, he writes LaHatMANA ala blech shemechasim by his tanuri agaz. He says it's totally in the reasons of Taisus. And then he goes on, he says, Afshi Yosem established like Palik. The Kohen Rav says that he would have learned not like the Mishnah Berurah. He would have learned that there's no machlokes, it's just different reasons to explain the minik. And that everybody agrees. And that Reb Baruch was saying one reason, but he could also agree to the reason of the Ri, which is a chiddush. He goes on to say, Tzarich Ian Gadol Divrei Mishnah Berurah, Lashar Tzion, Sharash Chayshish Lahachmir. He's not so thrilled with what it says in the Mishnah Berurah. There's even another thing, is that how do you learn the ein limchais of this Mishnah Berurah?
Let's go back to Mishnah Berurah.
He says, Loshen zeh mashma shtei atayim emes ubishvil tam echad yesh lahatir. That's the way we learned also. You have to have one of the reasons in order to not be moicha. Okay, so this everybody say, I want the Olim probably to see this inside. You'll enjoy it more. L'chayra. Yeah, Ramesha does mask. Ramesha's maskana is l'chayra, not so much like Mishnah Berurah. And he seems to be willing to be makel, even if you would have one of these reasons. Kloimar, even if you would have the reason of where it's not Maskar V'Hoilach, but the reason that I can't be matman inside, Ramesh over there does seem to come out. He says, Sarchi and Gadol the Mishnah Berurah. Zenir Lastaiti. He says, Toiv Yoser, Shalei Lasais, HATMANA Gemura, just get out of the Shaila and do HATMANA b'mixes. But he does end with the Sarchi and Gadol on the Mishnah Berurah, which is.
Can the Rav explain again what Ramesh's problem with the Mishnah Berurah is?
His problem with Mishnah Berurah is he feels that there's no reason. First of all, he believes that the Rush was makel like the Ri, number one. And number two is he feels that even the Rabbeinu Baruch was not arguing on the Ri. Like if there's a bit more sugidik, you'd have to see the Lashonis inside of Rabbeinu Baruch and the Ri to appreciate. This was not the Mekubal de Kipsach. The Shmir Shabbos, for example, in Parak Aleph, Ha'ara Reish Kav Ches, the Shmir Shabbos himself is in Parak Aleph, Sifayin Hey. But the Shmir Shabbos goes like the Pashtus of Mishnah Berurah, that this is not something that a person should do. Take a towel and drape it in a way where it's totally draped. Because you do have to be chayshish for the shita of Rabbeinu Baruch, that the only at there was when it was miskar v'hoilech, and obviously our hot plates are not miskar v'hoilech. They increase heat, and therefore one shouldn't wrap a towel on the hot plate. That's the as long as it's open, it would be mutter. And even Ramesha says it's Yisrael type, so certainly that's what someone should do. But at least now we have a case of HATMANA b'davar moisef hevel. Now, by side, that's number one. Let's go now to a shaila and we'll begin to see a little bit of the kulas. That's the chumras of HATMANA v'davar ma'asev hevel. However, over here in Beis, it's a very, very important kula, which let's see what we can do with this kula. And we'll shtel shaila. Is a person allowed to take stam silver foil, he has a piece of potato kugel in the fridge, and he wants to take that potato kugel, and he wants to wrap that potato kugel, stam, like a normal person, he has cut silver foil from before Shabbos. He wants to take a piece of potato kugel on Shabbos, even, or before Shabbos, whichever one we'll see in a moment. He wants to take that potato kugel, wrap it, and put it on top of the cholent pot, something that we learned last week, that for sure you're allowed to take food, which is fully cooked and fully baked, and put it on top of a hot plate, on top of a cholent, which is on a hot plate that we spoke about last time. That's certainly mutter. You can take the schnitzel and put it on top of the cholent. No problem. The shaila is that can he take it and wrap, which most people want to do. Nobody wants to take a piece of schnitzel and put it on top of the pot. It's going to make a mess. So he wants to take a piece of silver foil, wrap it, the schnitzel, and then put it on top of the hot plate. Is he allowed to do that on Shabbos? What's the shaila? Oh, the shaila is he's doing a HATMANA, and now it's not even a HATMANA v'davar she'eino ma'asev hevel, it's a HATMANA v'davar ma'asev hevel. He's wrapping his potato kugel in a piece of silver foil, and that silver foil chaps the heat, like we just explained. And for carrot, it's going to make it more hot on Shabbos, right? If you take the potato kugel, put it straight on the cholent pot, someone take more time to heat up. Now he takes it, he wraps it, he puts it on top of the cholent, so the heat goes, and it's chapped by the silver foil, and that's a HATMANA v'davar ma'asev hevel. So you're allowed to do this on Shabbos. You're allowed to do it on Erev Shabbos. Even on Erev Shabbos, we should have the shaila, because on Erev Shabbos is an isser of HATMANA v'davar ma'asev hevel. So here, if you're going to believe that a silver foil is HATMANA v'davar ma'asev hevel, because it's on top of the fire, and the fire is ma'asev v'hoilech, so is that going to be mutter on Erev Shabbos? So there is a shaila about silver foil in general. You know, the shaila like this. The shaila is that everyone knows there's a shaila about a thermos on Shabbos. Let's say I go to my neighbor, my urn is out, and I want to just take a thermos, a good old-fashioned thermos. I want to fill it up with hot water so that for the rest of the Shabbos, I don't have to bother my neighbor, and I'll fill up this thermos on Shabbos. Okay, Erev Shabbos, there can't be a shaila, because a thermos is a davar she'eino ma'asev hevel. So for sure, the most that it could be is Erev Shabbos, a davar she'eino ma'asev hevel. Obviously, there's no shaila. But now on Shabbos, Friday night, I see I don't have an urn. Shraga was in my Shai a few months ago by me, that somebody had a urn that went out, and they came by, and they came with an urn on a thermos on Shabbos, and they wanted to just fill up. I had a big urn, and they wanted to fill up. And well, now it's a HaRav, because that was Mekel, so now we have to figure this out. Are you allowed to do that? You're allowed to fill up an urn on Shabbos. So this is a big fight, a big discussion. Most are toilet on a machlekes Rashi Tosfos, which the Olam will see in Siman Reish and Zayin Sif Hey. But I know that as of yet, I'm not sure if the Olam saw it. Over there, I was talking about a situation in the Gemara. It's a machlekes Rashi Tosfos, which I won't go into now, where you take water that was in a kli rishon, and now you pour it into a kli sheni, and then you do HATMANA in that kli sheni. So now there's a big shaila. Do we say that, well, you see, he's already cooling it down, so therefore he's not so nervous, so therefore you'll even let him do HATMANA? That's called pina mimechel lemechem. It's not the same pina mimechel lemechem that we had last time, but it's you're taking the water from a hat, from kli rishon, pouring it into a pot, and then wrapping that pot. So on this, the Shulchan Aruch says in pina tavshel b'Shabbos mikdeira l'kdei acheres, it's mutter to be matmin in the davar she'eino ma'asev hevel. What's the reason why the Gemara says it's mutter? What's the reason why it's mutter? It's machlekes Rashi Tosfos. Some say the reason why is because for carrot, he's obviously trying to cool it down, something like that. Others say, no, the reason it's mutter is even if he's not trying to cool it down, but because be'etzim it's cold. It's machlekes Rashi Tosfos. So most say that's the shaila of a thermos. That's what a lot say. I shouldn't say most. Many want to say it's machlekes Rashi Tosfos. Here, I'm obviously not taking this water to cool it down. I'm obviously coming to keep the heat. So therefore, some will say it's aser, some will say it's mutter. Machlekes Rashi Tosfos. There's a Shevet Levi that wants to say everybody will say it's aser. Okay, not our sugya right now. Comes again the Goyim of Moshe and Chelik Aleph, and he has a different way of looking at this. Rav Moshe is in Chelik Aleph, Siman Sadi Hey. Rav Moshe has a whole different approach, which I just want to steal something from Rav Moshe. I'm not going to go into the whole thermos, but I want to steal something over here. Rav Moshe declares a murder kazaz. Look at Rav Moshe like this. Look, he says, when I take a thermos, Rav Moshe wants to say it has nothing to do with Rashi Taisis. He says, look, when I take, he says, Enochanami, according to some Rishonim, it's for sure mutter. But Rav Moshe says, look, even according to the other Rishonim, he says, our Gemara is talking about a totally different case. Our case. He says, when I take a thermos, so am I allowed to take the water and fill up the thermos with water? Yes. Why? Because at that point, it's not HATMANA. HATMANA is only when it's covered at all sides. So when I'm filling up the thermos, that he says, Rav Moshe, that's for sure mutter. I didn't do any HATMANA. I'm still filling it up until it's covered on all four sides. We pass in HATMANA b'mixes. It's leishmei HATMANA. So a little bit of HATMANA is not HATMANA. So Mela is like Rav Moshe, when I didn't fill it up, when I'm just in the process of filling it up, it's mutter. So Dr. Moshe, so what's your problem? Your problem is that when you're going to put on the lid, so at that second, then you're turning this into HATMANA. So your problem is on the lid. So Dr. Moshe, if you look in Shulchan Aruch and Sif Beis, so Shulchan Aruch says, Afilu tavshel shenitzbadshel called sargai is asalat minai. Mekom makain. It's a lasem kelim al tavshel kedei l'shoyrai min achbarim. If you want to cover something,
put on Sif Beis, please. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. He says, if you want to cover something, Dr. Moshe, a lid is mutter. A lid is mutter. Now, Rav Moshe goes far as to say, he says, a lid is mutter. So when I'm filling up the water, that was mutter because I didn't do HATMANA. So Dr. Moshe, when I'm filling up a thing, and then afterward I put on the lid, it's also mutter. Why? Dr. Moshe, a lid is inherently not kavana. Why? So Dr. Moshe, over here it says in Shulchan Aruch that the only time there's an isser of HATMANA is when my kavana is for HATMANA for the purpose of increasing chayim or being shomer chayim. But what if I'm wrapping something for nothing to do with chayim? I'm doing it because I want to keep out bugs. I want to keep out what does he have here? Mice. I don't know, all types of things. I'm doing the wrapping for a different reason. The whole reason Chazal gave a gzeira of HATMANA is because you're showing us your sehitzt. Or like we saw before, you're going to do something. But what if I'm not wrapping for that intention? So this has nothing to do with psikration. What do you mean so if it's wrapped? No. Chazal only answered if you fit into the chash that Chazal had. They were afraid a guy like you is nervous. You're showing us you're nervous about the heat. You're going to come to cause trouble. But that's only if I'm doing it because I'm nervous. Let's say I'm doing it for a totally different reason. So Rav Moshe says, it says over here in Shulchan Aruch, you're allowed to put on a lid. Why? Because when I put on a lid, I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it for a totally different reason. Says the Mishabur over here in Sivkat and Gedalid. He says, Lasim Kalim, Hainu, Hainu, Afilu Begadim Shemai Midchoin, even if you're doing it with things that are going to prevent the heat from going out, Shomer the Chaim, Shari, Kevan She'enai Mekaven Lezeh. It would sound like in the Mishnah Berurah that you have to have kavana not for keeping in the chayim. Says Rav Moshe, the Mishnah Berurah is talking about a specific case. He's talking about a case of when you're not using the lid, which is the normal ruggle lid of that item. So you're using like a towel to cover a pot. And you're doing it to keep in the chayim. If you're taking a towel to cover the pot, says Rav Moshe, b'das the Mishnah Berurah, then that's us. In other words, don't think, every food gets one pot. There are some achreinim, they want to say every food gets a pot, and therefore there's no HATMANA. Rav Moshe says no. We don't say every food is allowed to get a pot. No, but if you have a pot and you're putting on it, it's regular lid. So then a regular lid is misparish as one of the usages of one of the tachlisim of a lid is to keep in the chayim and to keep out the bugs. And that you're allowed even if your kavanah is for chayim. What's the Mishnah Berurah saying? The Mishnah Berurah is talking about where you're using a towel or a blanket or something, which is not its regular lid. Then, says the Mishnah Berurah, the only time you have the HATMANA Sif Beis is when you're doing it not with the kavanah of HATMANA for chayim. So listen what comes out, everybody says. So listen carefully. The Shulchan Aruch over here is telling us his side. First of all, when I do something, sheloi lekavanas HATMANA, it's not us. Number one. Number two, if I take a lid and I put it on, says the Mishabura, if you're mekavin, then seemingly that's a problem. Explains Rav Moshe, it doesn't mean what you're reading. It doesn't mean that you're putting on the lid, which is the normal lid to be on this pot. Because if you're putting on the normal lid, which is supposed to be here, so then we don't misparish this as an act of keeping in the claim. Because the lid has all its tachlisim. A lid is something that keeps in the heat. It keeps out the bugs. A lid does it memela. So there it doesn't matter what your kavan is. Because there it's always upgeteicht as something which is the tachlis of the lid. And the tachlis of the lid is to keep out the bugs, to keep in the heat. So we don't see it as a HATMANA when it's the davar rogel, says Rav Moshe. What does the Mishabura mean? The Mishabura means that you're putting on a towel, which is not the normal lid. So then it depends what your kavanah is. If your kavanah is to keep out the bugs, mutter. If your kavanah is to keep in the chayim, aser. Now that's Rabbi Isai's where Rav Moshe goes on there to explain. Therefore, by a thermos, says the Kohen Rav Moshe, when I put the water in a thermos, mutter, because I didn't do HATMANA yet. When I put on the lid, which is normal to be there, says Rav Moshe, it doesn't matter why you're putting on the lid. Even though everybody knows when you're putting on the lid of a thermos, you're doing it to keep out the bugs. No, you're doing it to go and keep the heat. That's what a thermos is. But says Rav Moshe, since that's inherently the tachlis of a lid, to also keep out the bugs, that's the shame of the lid. Doesn't matter what your kavanah is. So I was thinking like this. I want to know now, can I take a piece of silver foil and I want to wrap a piece of potato kugel in it and I want to put it on a cholin pot, and our shaila was l'chayra that's a davar ma'asav hevel, because you're taking something and it's going to chap the heat and it's going to be called the davar ma'asav hevel, which would be also even Arab Shabbos. But the fetus Rav Moshe, we could steal Rav Moshe. The fetus Rav Moshe, we could steal a bit. Because since over here, it's a normal, the davar haragel is that people use silver foil for all different tachlisim. You ask a fellow, why are you wrapping in silver foil? I don't know, I'm wrapping for cleanliness. I'm wrapping for the dryness. I don't want it to dry out. I am also wrapping for the heat, certainly. But I'm wrapping stam. People like they have a minute of the same day and don't even know why. I'm just wrapping in silver foil. Kavachimer, if they just took it out of the fridge and it was in silver foil. So then that's the davar haragel. Once that's the davar ragil, so then that goes into the heter of Rav Moshe, even if you're mekavin l'chayim. Klaimar, loy mevay, if you ask the person, why did you wrap it in silver foil before you put it on the pot? And he says, I did it because I don't want to get my pot dirty. Or he says, I did it because I want the potato kugel to stay pariv. Or he says, I did it because I don't want the potato kugel to dry out. If he says those reasons, it's vaday mut, it's not even shaila, because then that's not kavanas HATMANA. But Mashain came. Let's say he says, I'm doing it because I want to make it hotter faster. So now you're going to get nervous. So on that, we're going to say, no. Rav Moshe taught us that since it's a davar ragil to put silver foil on potato kugel for 30 different reasons, not just for chayim. So then that davar doesn't have the shame of a HATMANA. Now you're going to say, Rav Moshe was only mekel, if you're looking at tshuva, by a thermos, because he says anyways it's a machlekes rishonim, Rashi Taisvis. But over here also we could say that what's the worst case scenario? So you want to say the worst case scenario, you'll say, no, let's say my svar is wrong and you have to be machmir on the silver foil. But Rabbi Isai, don't forget the whole idea of wrapping something and putting it on a cholent on a hot plate, to call that a davar ma'asav hevel, that itself is a very big machlekes. Because we saw the Ri's Mekel, because the Ri was only machmer at kama that I could put it in, but at kama that I can't put it in, so then there's no problem. A kama that I can't put it in, the Ri held that there's no problem. So then it'll come out like this, that if I want to wrap my schnitzel, I put it on top of the cholent in silver foil, loy mevay, if he tells you explicitly my kavanah is that it shouldn't dry out, or that my kavanah is that it should be clean, of course it's mutter. But even if he tells you, I'm doing it because I want it to be hot. So then number one, we could be mekel because it's a davar ragel. Number two, we could say, and what's the worst case scenario? You don't hold the Rav Moshe. But anyways, it's a machlekes if you're allowed to be wrapping it and putting it on top, because what's your problem? That you'll come to what? Put it inside a hot plate? You can't do it because no way to put it in a hot plate. The re would be makel. Elamai, Rabbeinu Baruch wouldn't be makel. So it's a machlekes and rishonim, so we could be makel. This is Rabbi Sai, what I was going to come to say. And then I realized that there's one kasha, not a kasha, there's one scenario that on which what I'm saying was going to be a problem. Does anyone happy out what the problem is?
I assume none of this is applicable to taking the silver foil and putting it into the cholent that's on the crockpot.
That I'm going to talk about. I don't know if I'll get there now. I have 6 minutes left. But
that's
before that, sorry?
It's wrapped.
So you know what the problem what I'm saying is, Rabbi Sai? The problem is that it's gewaldic what I'm saying if you're doing this on Erev Shabbos. Because why? On Erev Shabbos, there's a problem only of a davar hamoisif hevel. So therefore, we just showed that number one, it's mutter because Ramoshe's far. Ramosh himself, you don't want to be makel. So you'll be makel with the tzirif. I told you Ramosh had a tzirif there by Rashi Taisa, so we have a tzirif also. Machlekes Ri and Rabbeinu Baruch, so we also have a tzirif. Okay, so we could be makel on Erev Shabbos. But on Shabbos, it's true. Mitzad davar hamoisif hevel, it's not such a problem. But on Shabbos, there's an isser to be matman, even b'davar she'ein hamoisif hevel. So it's at least a davar. So again, you have one svar for sure that it might not be called HATMANA. That svar you do have. Because like we said, maybe it's not called HATMANA because it's normal to wrap in silver foil. And even if he's doing it for Chaim, but the davar ruggle, the shame of this thing is all of its, but that svar is not pashut. So I said you can only be make on that svar, but see if the fact that what's the worst, I'm going to put it in and I can't put it in. Right. That only shows us that it's not considered the level of a davar moisif hevel, but it's still going to be considered a davar ain't a moisif hevel. So therefore, if you'd want to be make on Shabbos, the only way you can be make on Shabbos is number one, if he comes along and says, Mefurish, I'm doing it to make sure it doesn't get dry. I'm doing it to block the bugs for cleanliness. Then for sure it's mutter. If he says, I'm doing it because I want it to be hot, faster, so then that's only going to be makel with the svar of Rav Moshe, which Rav Moshe himself wasn't necessarily makel on. So I'd be a little bit nervous with that. Now, that's l'chayra. Now there is a very geshmak shaila, which the oilam knows about already. I see it's already 7:55. I think that shaila I'll leave for next time. And that's the shaila of wrapping a kishka, a potato kugel in the cholent itself. There is a different shaila, Rabbi Sai. There we're donning that the cholent itself is a matman agent. The cholent itself is a matman agent. The cholent is the matman. And we don't need remets. We answered things up to remets. We answered salt. We answered the Mishnah Berurah has a case in Reish and Chetz, which we'll talk about next time, where he asks water. He asks boiling hot water. You're not allowed to be, according to Mishnah Berurah, you can't take a baby bottle and submerge it inside boiling hot water because it's wrapped in the water. And Mishnah Berurah says you can't do that on Shabbos. If you let it stick out a little bit, it's HATMANA b'mixus.
You have an agasa problem?
Which case?
When you want to put the thing into the cholent?
I'm talking about even Erev Shabbos.
Oh, Erev Shabbos, okay.
Erev Shabbos. So there's going to be a problem that we have to talk about next time is how are you going to be able to keep your kishka wrapped in a silver foil in the cholent. Now, don't get involved in the silver foil. The silver foil is not our issue. Our issue is the cholent is a matman agent. Why is the cholent a matman agent? Because the cholent is boiling hot cholent, and even on Erev Shabbos, it's a boiling hot cholent, and it's being moisif hevel around your kishka. So why isn't that HATMANA? And don't get confused. The Shevet Levi says, I know what you're thinking. You remember the Helzel. Who remembers the Helzel? They used to have this like the gurgle of the chicken or something, and it was wrapped in the skin of the chicken, and they used to throw that in the cholent. So he says, oh, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say it was, they used to wrap it in a skin. They used to take the skin of the chicken and wrap the Helzel. They used to wrap it inside, and they would throw that in the cholent. So you see, they did things like that. Shevet Levi says no, because there they would eat the whole ganze zach with the skin and everything. So it's one big food. But our case isn't one big food. Our case is the kishka is blocked from the cholent. It's two separate foods. So why don't we say that it's mutman right now in a davar moisef hevel? That we're going to have to talk about next time. I want to leave you with a thought, though, with Shaila. I just told you, Allah, I want you to think about this. It's an interesting Shaila to think about. This Friday night, you have a baby, an anical, your own child, and the baby's crying. So you want to take a baby bottle. And what are you going to do? It's freezing cold baby bottle. So what do? So you take a negelvaser schlitzel, you take the hot water from the urn, it's klisheni, and you put it inside the baby bottle. I just told you a minute ago, the Mishabur and Ches says in first, it's usher to submerge it in a way where it's blocked, lagamre. Sometimes you want to do that because of the fact that it's, the kid is screaming and you want to make it faster. Okay, Mishabur says you can't do that. You have to, okay, maybe if his mom is screaming, there's a mukkah because you're not coming to make it hot. You're coming just to take away the cold, lahafik tzina. So there might be some cool in that. Okay. But the Derek Cloud, what we do is we just take it, leave it inside. It takes 2 minutes and you let it float there. And that's mutter because that's HATMANA. The mixus is loishme HATMANA. I'll leave it with a Shaila. The other one's going to see this week that the Shulchan Aruch holds that a HATMANA, the mixus is yesh me HATMANA. The Shita of the Shulchan Aruch, you guys are going to see this week, it's not just here, it's in Rishon and Gimel. He holds HATMANA, the mixus is HATMANA. The Ramah Paskin is not like that. And that's how the Ashkenazim hold. And the Chazon Ish was machmir like the Shulchan Aruch, that HATMANA, the mixus is yes called HATMANA. So I have a Shaila. How's a Svardish Yid and a Bnei Brak Yid, how's he going to take this baby bottle and heat it up on Shabbos? All right. He can't submerge it because we can't submerge it, but he can't even let it stick out a little bit because it's partially mutman, and by the Svardim and by the Bnei Brakers, HATMANA b'mixes, a partial HATMANA is called HATMANA. So I know what you'll say. You'll say, say this. Maybe it is aser. It's Nishtaguna, right? Who says that such a thing is takamutter. But I'm going to leave you with a Shaila. The Shulchan Aruch and Siman Shin Yud Ches, Pashim first says this case is mutter. When Siman Shin Yud Ches, and this is the Mechaber. The Mechaber is the one that has the problem. The Mechaber in Shin Yud Ches, I think it was in Sifri Gimel. Yeah, he says mutter litain kitan shel mayim. You're allowed to take a bottle of water, a baby bottle, a shar mashkim, a baby bottle, the kli sheni. You're allowed to take it and put it in a kli sheni. Mutter litain kitan shel mayim. First Mishabur. First Mishabur. First Shulchan Aruch. Excuse me. Afilu am yatzel edus by. So it's a pella. Pella. The Shulchan Aruch sheet is you're all going to see this week over and over. Ramah HATMANA b'mixas, loishve HATMANA. Shulchan Aruch holds HATMANA b'mixas, yes is HATMANA. So now I take that baby bottle. We know what the Ashkenazim, we just let it float. That's what the Mishabur says in Rishon and Ches. Let it float. Okay, right? You see from over there, food could be a matman. That's our Shaila of Chalent with the Kishka. Food could be a matman because the water could be a matman. Fine. But what do we do? HATMANA b'mixas. But a Svardish Yid doesn't have HATMANA b'mixas. So that should be aser, even if it's not submerged. So the Shulchan Aruch says explicitly not like that. Mutter litan kitan shel mayim in mayim chamin. It's a big pella. I expect an answer from the Olam and Hashem, right? This everybody says taka a big pella. So next time we're going to talk hopefully about Kishka and the Chalent and Avada about the crackpots. That's the big shaila. The crackpots is mutman, it's fire on all sides, and we have to see that's a real HATMANA. That's a davar ma'asev hevel, so it's also even an Erev Shabbos. If you make a sikum, Rabbi say, you saw at the beginning of the sugya, HATMANA on a davar she'eina ma'asev hevel is also even on Shabbos. And therefore, if the hot plate goes out, you can't wrap it. It's better to go to the neighbor. Nobody would believe such a thing. It's better to put it on somebody else's hot plate. Unbelievable. But to wrap it, that's going to be also on Shabbos. Erev Shabbos, mutter. Ben Hashmashas, if you were in Makabel Shabbos, mutter. HATMANA davar ma'asev hevel, aser. Do we have cases? Sure do. Sifchas. If there's a fire underneath and the towel chaps it, that's aser. The Mishabur says, ain't limchos if somebody does it, because there's 2 reasons why that's aser. We said the reason because it chaps it, lefi that it's aser. But there's another reason brought down, that the reason why it's aser is you'll come to put it inside. That can't be a problem. That's only a problem if it's into something that you could be matman in. That are the 2 stadim. Nafkamina is, could you wrap it and put it on a blech? Ramesha was a bit more makel. The Velt, like the Mishnah Berurah, is a bit more machmir. Then we saw a Gevaldika case. What about silver foil? So we saw a Gevaldika Yisoid that if you're being matman just to be for a different reason, to block from bugs, to block from this, to block from that, then that's not an Isser of HATMANA. And the Moshe taught us that if you have something that's the Davar Rugel, even if it's your Kavana, that's considered that its ikar prime purpose is for other purposes also. And therefore it's mutter, and that's why Rav Moshe was made up by the case of the thermos, even putting on the lid, because the lid is a davar raga, and we don't misparish this as kavana lahatman, even if your kavana is lahatman. We use that by silver foil, even if your kavana is to actually be heating up the schnitzel faster. But if it's a davar raga, because people put on silver foil for 50 reasons, so therefore you're putting it on, even if you're putting it on for the gloimavai, if you're putting it on for the right reason, to keep out the this, that, whatever, mutter. Even if you're doing it for heat, so then we have this svara of Rav Moshe, it's a davar raga that for other purposes, and therefore it's mutter, and we said that'll be mutter on Erev Shabbos, because you have the tzirif of the re.
Okay.